Hi, I want to talk to you today about contraindications for the liver gallbladder flush. So, a lot of people wonder, one of the first questions I get is, can you do a liver flush if you don't have a gallbladder anymore? Well, yes, you absolutely can. And in fact, the circumstances that led you to get your gallbladder out are part of the reason why it's even more important for you to do liver flushing. Because the liver actually protects the gallbladder, and things only start building up in the gallbladder once they've pretty significantly already built up in the liver. So the gallbladder is a sac that stores bile that the liver has made and sent out. And the cholesterol stones, the stones build up first in the liver, and if they build up in the gallbladder, they become harder stones and more calcified. And then eventually it might get so full or you have attacks and then you get your gallbladder out. But really, taking the gallbladder out is like taking off the end of the pipe. And, it's like you have a vacuum cleaner that's all clogged up, but you just like clean something off the top edge. It really doesn't solve the actual problem. So yes, you can absolutely do the liver flush if you don't have a gallbladder. And in fact, I would highly encourage it, and you could see a lot of improvement. So what are the contraindications for doing a liver flush? One of the biggest ones is if you have any sort of hard bowel obstruction. So if you have a small bowel obstruction, which are pretty rare and generally happens from post-surgical adhesions. So if you have an operation that doesn't go as expected when they're closing or something, and then there's scar tissue that's created, and or something is messed up with the bowel wall and you have an actual block there. In that case, it's not a good idea to proceed with the flush. On that similar level, one of the sort of cautionary areas is severe constipation and hemorrhoid issues. Constipation really should be at least mitigated. It should be palliated to be able to do the liver flushes. So whether that means you need to be supplementing extra magnesium, you need to be going up to bowel tolerance with vitamin C, or you're doing daily enemas, those are some of the options for getting the bowels moving. But if they're absolutely stuck and you're unwilling or unable to do any of those methods, you also probably should not proceed with the liver flush, because the liver flush is unearthing things from inside of your organ and it's dumping them down the chute, and you want them to get all the way out of your body. And if there's blockage at any point along the bowels, small intestines or large intestines, if it isn't flowing right, then you're not going to get all that stuff out, and then you're going to get toxemia from sort of reabsorbing the toxins that had been stored safely away in the liver. So another contraindication for doing the liver flush, this is just more of a short-term timing thing, is that you really don't want to do the liver flush when you have an acute illness. So if you have a respiratory illness, if you have a digestive illness, if you have some sort of short-term virus that is, creating a lot of inflammation, congestion, vomiting, nausea, that's not a good time. You do need your energy, and you need your body to be not distracted too much to do the liver flush. So when you have an acute illness like a cold or the flu, your body is busy clearing and dealing with that situation. And so you don't want to put it under the added stress of doing the liver flush and sort of asking it to pivot its attention to a different activity. In terms of chronic viruses, though, liver flushing is one of the best things you can do. So if you're more of a post-viral syndrome person or have some sort of long haul anything, liver flushing can really turn the corner for you. But so the acute illness, and on that line too, you also don't want to be dehydrated. So also sometimes in acute illnesses, say you're vomiting or have diarrhea, or you have a fever, you might be getting dehydrated. So you also don't want to do a liver flush when you're dehydrated or if you're limited in your eating. Sometimes when you are sick, you also lose your appetite, or you have a more limited palate, or you even fast. Sometimes the body wants to fast. It's not really a great idea in most cases, to be on some sort of extended fast going into the liver flush. You want to have some strength. You want your body to be in like as good of shape as possible. I know a lot of people coming to liver flushes do have chronic illness and do have symptoms, but you want to be you want to be like not at your like low dip, but sort of at your sort of upper coasting level of your sort of current symptom picture. You don't want to be dehydrated. You don't want to be too weak. So there are some people that are actually maybe a little bit too weak and too frail. Say you're really underweight or you can't eat. Some people do need liver flushes sometimes to get over the hump of not being able to eat a lot of foods and to be able to improve the digestion. But if you're extremely weak and like your body energy just is too low, and or you're like really thin and not able to eat and really not able to move that much, the liver flush may be asking too much of your body. So let me know. You can get a hold of me if that's your case, and there are certain things we could work on to improve slightly your, to steadily get some improvement in the overall energy level so that you could eventually work up to doing a flush. Another sort of, so if you've recently had chemo, that's another contraindication, because that stuff is really strong and really toxic, and it, the liver takes care of a lot of that and sort of packages it up to keep it safe. But you don't want to be like flooding that into your system before your body has been able to sort of break it down as much as it can. So they do say that you want to wait 6 to 8 months after doing chemotherapy treatment before doing liver flush. And there, of course, are other things that you can do in that time, but you just want to be aware that that those drugs are dangerous, and especially if you sort of let them loose again in your body. On that same note, there are some prescription drugs that are also going to be really challenging if they are released into the bloodstream in higher quantities, because they've been held in the liver. So some pharmaceuticals, it's not a good idea to do a liver flush with. So if you're on something that's really strong and could be in that department, you should look into that, and we can look into that. You can reach out to me if you have questions about that. Thyroid medication should be okay, and hopefully down the line you'll see improvements in that. But obviously you need to work with your doctor and not change any of your medication, just because on a whim, you're wanting to do the liver flush. But you need to work with your doctor to determine how to best go about that. Another sort of contraindication with the liver flushing is during pregnancy. And it's especially true for anyone who's starting flushing for the first time. The baby is directly connected to your bloodstream. And so even if you do the flush safely, and you take the precautions that we teach you to sort of bind to anything that might be not carried out immediately, you just don't want to have any risks or take any chances with the baby inside of you. So it's really best to put off liver flushing and just focus on nourishment and focus on mineralization and all of that, so that you can support that baby as well as you can. And you can feel reassured that your body, the liver, it's doing its best to keep the toxins you have inside of you as packaged up safely as possible. So although we do pass on toxins to our offspring in the womb, it could actually be worse if you sort of like loosen things up into the body. On that note, breastfeeding is another questionable area. If someone is already familiar with liver flushing and they kind of know how their body handles it, and maybe they're farther down the path, that's definitely an option. And if it depends really on like the state of health of the woman, and also like, is the baby eating other foods yet? How strong does the woman feel? Because nourishment and renourishment, replenishment is going to be so important postpartum. So in that case, you might want to be focusing on mineralization, and when you and the baby are in a stable place and the baby is eating other foods also, and you're feeling strong enough to undergo that, we can reach out and we can talk about that. But those are like cautionary areas. And then also for the women, also the menstruation time. So when we're actually bleeding is not a good time to liver flush. There's like a pretty strong period of time around that menstruation cycle, around the actual bleeding. So like right before it also, maybe some of you have noticed that there's some fluid retention that sometimes happens. And that's actually part of the cycle of us and part of the different hormones that are operating at that time. And we are retaining fluids. We have holding of fluids. And so that is one of the reasons why liver flushing at that time is not a great idea, because it's kind of going counter to the body releasing things, even though we're also releasing. And so that's the other aspect of it, is that the liver is already occupied. It has to do, the liver is quite intimately involved with that process of shedding our uterine lining. And so it's like, you don't want to ask the liver to do something totally different when it's already wrapped up in that process. And your whole body too, and like what your body is doing is that it's shedding something and it's working on the whole previous month, so it already has kind of its work cut out for it. So it's like, you don't want to be adding like a whole new load that it wasn't expecting necessarily. And I have found personally that and some of the people I've worked with have found that trying to flush right around the time of bleeding usually does not produce great results. It can. Some people can do it fine, but it's not as much recommended. And so another cautionary note is around diabetes. And so it's not really a hard contraindication, but you do want to be aware that part of the flush involves a short period of fasting, and that you may, if you have diabetes, you may need to adjust that and have some sort of snacks that fit into the protocol that don't interfere with it too much. And especially things like electrolytes and coconut water can really help during that period of time. So that's also a note, to consider if you have diabetes. Just to go back to the drug situation, the pharmaceuticals also, one of the aspects why they are somewhat of a contraindication is that a lot of pharmaceuticals are symptom suppressing, and so they are in a way suppressing the body's expression. And the liver flush is like moving and working with the body's expression. And so sometimes those pharmaceuticals can be like trying to like keep the lid on the pot, they're like trying to like keep the steam in, and kind of like crush it down. Whereas the liver flush is like trying to actually move that. And so they're kind of at odds. They can be counterproductive, basically. So that's something to consider. So those are some of the, if you have really weak kidneys, also you might want to consider addressing the kidneys with the kidney cleanse first. And of course, it's always good to have the bowels in as good of shape as possible. So just making sure you're moving in that department and or do a colon cleanse before taking on the liver flush. Anyways, that's a few of the contraindications. I hope that helps clear some things up, and feel free to reach out and we can talk through any of your situations and help you determine if liver flushing is right for you at this time. And remember, some of these things could just be passing days. You know, you might schedule a liver flush, but then you get a cold, and so you just postpone it and do it a different week. You know, you wait till you're in a good, strong place. So thanks for joining.